Welcome to this special episode of our program Arab Affairs. As usual, we will be tackling an important Arab affair. Today we'll be speaking about an important visit the President is paying to Kuwait. The President is to arrive in Kuwait in few times from now or at any minute in an official talks and the signing, of course, of a number of bilateral cooperation agreements. The President is expected to hold talks with the Kuwaiti Emir, Sheikh Sabah Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, and would be focusing on enhancing bilateral relations in a way that serves the interests of both countries and, of course, the whole region. This visit reflects definitely the special bonds that gather Egypt and Kuwait. Will be speaking about that, and moreover will be speaking about a very intensified week for the President, where he met with the G7 leaders in Biarritz, France, and then in Tokyo, or rather in Japan, where he attended the TICAD. We'll be speaking about how the President tackled the Middle East issues and files with the seven richest economies in the world and the, of course, seven most powerful economies in the whole world. We'll be speaking about that in our episode. Before we delve into our discussion, first let's have a quick look on the Arab news that took place during this week, and we'll come back.
The United Nations Security Council was considering a draft resolution that would call for a truce in northwestern Syria to avoid what is called a further deterioration of the already catastrophic humanitarian situation, though diplomats said that such a move is likely to face opposition from veto power Russia. On the ground, Syrian government forces seized several towns and villages in the northwest Syria as deadly airstrikes hit the terrorist-held bastion of Idlib. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, 7 people died in airstrike in the south of the stronghold, a day after airstrikes killed 12 others in a town. Last week, government forces took control of Khan Sheikhoun, a town on a key highway that runs through Idlib province, linking Damascus to second city Aleppo. The United Nations said it will help evacuate civilians from an Syrian desert camp near the border with Jordan after a mission last week determined who wanted to leave. According to the United Nations official, around 12,700 people remain in the isolated camp near a base used by the US-led coalition fighting the Daesh militant group. The Syrian government and Russia said that they had opened corridors out of the camp, calling on residents to leave. The United Nations says more than half of the original population has left in the past month. The United Nations Security Council voted to renew its long-running peacekeeping mission in Lebanon for a year, warning of a new conflict with neighboring Israel. The draft resolution, written by France and approved unanimously, would allow for approximately 10,000 members of the United Nations Interim Force in Lebanon, which was created in March 1978, to stay in place. According to the draft text, the Security Council warned that violations of the cessation of hostilities could lead to a new conflict that none of the parties or the region can afford. It condemns all violations of the blue line between Lebanon and Israel, both by air and ground, and strongly calls upon all parties to respect the cessation of hostilities. The Lebanese army fired on an Israeli drone in southern part of the country Wednesday. That incident came just days after Hezbollah blamed an armed drone attack in its South Beirut stronghold on Israel. The United States has agreed to give Tunisia financial aid worth $335 million over 5 years to support its democratic transition. The aid will be financed by U.S. Agency for International Development. Unemployment stands at about 15%, up from 12% in 2010, due to weak growth, low investment, and high inflation, which was 6.5% last month.
Right, welcome back, and let me welcome our guest, Dr. Ibrahim Ghazawi, strategic and political analyst. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
I guess we'll start with this visit expected at any time from now, the arrival of President Sisi to Kuwait. If we speak about the prospects of such visit, the timing of it, and how significant it is.
Well, let me start with congratulating the Arab and Islamic world with the new Hijri Islamic year.
Yes, you're right.
And hopefully this year will be much better than the one that has gone already. And in terms of security and stability and cooperation between all Arab nations and Islamic nations.
And prosperity, I hope.
And prosperity, of course. Well, in the same context comes the visit of President Sisi to Kuwait. We have always to remember that Kuwait and its leaders have played a very instrumental role in appeasing the tensions in this area for a couple of years, or probably 3 or 4 years today. The Gulf area is sizzling with events, a lot of events, and most of it's against stability and against development. And if we talk about Iran and its suspicious involvement into the internal affairs of all Arab Gulf countries, whether in Yemen or Saudi Arabia or all other countries, or Lebanon and Syria. And talking also about the tensions in Hormuz Strait and Arab Gulf, which affects international trade, especially when we talk about energy and oil. Also, we have this internal problems in the region. We have what is going on in Yemen, in Iraq, and in Syria, and in Lebanon nowadays, and the situation is
escalating.
Escalating every minute between
Lebanon
and Israel, and a lot of. Hopefully that would not happen, but
the issue of Hezbollah or the strike that Israel carried out with comes at a very strange time. We'll speak about that later on, because it was really a strange time when certain developments were taking place at the G7 or in France, and suddenly Israel strike. Anyway, we'll speak about that later in our episode.
So back to the Kuwaiti visit today, I think this is it comes at the very right time, and even President Sisi, I think this is probably the third visit from President Sisi to Kuwait since 2014. Yes, Kuwait, as I said, plays an instrumental role in stability in the region. We always remember how Kuwaiti involvement was always a glove of peace in terms of the relations, the interrelations between different Gulf countries, and they played, and its leadership played tremendous and very serious role during the period that preceded the issue of between Qatar and other Gulf countries and Egypt.
Yes, it played a mediating role.
And they tried actually their best to bring sort of stability to the region. And I think this is the mainstream of the Kuwaiti leadership. That has Emir Sabah has always been keen to play this mediation role in the region. And I think this visit from President Sisi comes at a time when there must be efforts from all concerned partners of the issues in the Gulf, trying to reach peaceful solutions. If we talk about Yemen, if we talk about Iran and Hezbollah, and whether in Syria or in Lebanon, and all internal issues, even in the Gulf countries themselves, and the issue between Qatar and other Gulf countries. So I think necessarily this visit could be to show support of Egypt to the stability of the Gulf countries, and also Egypt's readiness to assist and help. And this is, I think, this is a duty of Egypt today towards the Gulf countries. We specifically talk about Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, and Bahrain. They have always been supporting Egypt, and I think this is normal to have such visits to not only strengthen the bilateral relations between the two countries, Kuwait and Egypt, but we talk about, on a larger scale, we talk about the Gulf countries as a whole. And when we talk about Kuwait, as I said, Kuwait is a main mediator in the business or the issues of the Gulf countries, the internal issues between them. And Egypt also is joining hand with Kuwait trying to bring stability and peace to this region.
Two wise voices meeting together for discussion.
Yeah, exactly. Well, discussion is very much needed today, and I think it is necessary, and it's so necessary to be done today when we talk about President Sisi. Strenuous days that he spent in France for a few days, attending these G7 meetings, and then flying directly to Tokyo for another few days to attend the conference of
in reverse to time,
yeah.
In reverse to time and
of
reverse
course,
to biological system, and everything.
So it has been very hectic timetable for him. So to be concluded directly with this visit to Kuwait, it means that there is something very serious going to be discussed there, and hopefully
for the good and interest of all the
for the best interest
region.
for Kuwait and Gulf countries, and also Egypt.
Definitely, definitely. How the president tackled the Middle East issues, particularly during the G7, was a matter of focus. The president met with all the G7 leaders, and in all his meetings, he was so much keen to raise all the Arab files. Before we continue on with our discussion, let's have this report and the president at the G7 in Biarritz, France. Let's watch the report and we'll come back for more discussion.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi visited France and Japan last week as he participated at the G7 summit and Tokyo's International Conference on African Development, known as the TICAD. Upon an invitation from French President Emmanuel Macron, President el-Sisi attended the G7 summit in Biarritz, France. The G7 was overshadowed by many topics, top of which are security and combating terrorism, combating human trafficking, illegal immigration, inequality, in addition to supporting women empowerment, climate change, financial and economic challenges. President el-Sisi, head of the African Union, delivered a speech in which he presented Africa's vision towards achieving security, stability, and sustainable development, and also means to combat inequality. On the sidelines of the G7 meetings, President el-Sisi met with French President Emmanuel Macron on means of enhancing bilateral ties, as well as the latest developments in the Middle East. Separately, President el-Sisi held talks with U.S. President Donald Trump. The president hailed positive developments over the strategic ties binding Egypt and the United States, and asserted Egypt's keen interest in continuing consultations with the United States administration on means of establishing peace, security, and stability in the Middle East in light of the many crises warring the region. Trump expressed appreciation for President el-Sisi, praising the successful restoration of security and stability in Egypt and the country's ongoing development projects despite the unstable regional conditions. President el-Sisi also met with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and said he hoped that the upcoming period will witness active steps towards promoting bilateral ties and joint cooperation in politics, economy, security, and tourism. The two leaders particularly reviewed joint coordination in fighting terrorism and agreed to consolidate efforts in facing the mounting challenges in the Middle East. In Japan, President el-Sisi addressed the inaugurated session of Tokyo's International Conference on African Development, known as the TICAD. President Sisi highlighted the significance of the event, bringing together prominent African leaders along with their international strategic partners with the aim of boosting cooperation and development efforts in the continent since the launch in 1993. The President called on intensifying scientific cooperation with Japan and benefiting from the country's experience in optimizing the use of African natural resources, thus contributing in bolstering trade and increasing investments. In his speech at the closing session of the TCAT 7 summit, President Sisi reiterated that African countries are an important phase where both trade and investment opportunities steadily increase. President Sisi said that such gatherings help in boosting cooperation among African nations and Japan, as it recommended the development of human resources where African youth constitute 65% of the continent's population. The President hailed Japan's interest in increasing cooperation and communication among African peoples and pushing development in the continent while respecting the sovereignty of each country. Egypt's strong presence in regional and international forums reflects the country's leading position, particularly under its current chairmanship of the African Union and continued pursuit to promote the African economy.
Right, welcome back. And as said at this report, that during his two visits, the President spoke about African and Middle East issues. Definitely each region or each world has its own causes. However, there is a part of Africa that really links both regions. So I guess that issues pertaining the Middle East and Africa are in a certain way relevant or mutual or common, if I may say. If we speak about the G7, and the President held a number of meetings, not just the French President and the American and British one, but a number of important meetings. How timing were those meetings on the sidelines of such an important world gathering such as the G7, and how far do you think that the leaders were able to grasp and take into consideration the wise words that said by a wise leader who has no interests except the well-being of all the countries?
Well, I believe that the G7 summit was really a golden opportunity for Africa to, and also for the Middle East. I mean, the main issues and concerns to be presented on the negotiation of meetings there. And as you mentioned, it was not only the main course of the agenda for the meetings of the G7, but also, and even more importantly, the sideline meetings between President Sisi, not only as President of Egypt, but also, and even more importantly, as a representative of Africa in this...
as the President of the, or the Chairman of the African Union.
Exactly.
In this capacity.
As a representative to every single and every individual African country, to all concerns of Africa in this very important summit. And we have to shed the light very quickly on why this summit is so important. We talk about only 7 nations who controls more than 50% of the world economy. We talk about the richest and the highest and the strongest economies in the world. And 3 of them are 1 and 2 and 3 economies in the world. United States, gross domestic production $19.7 trillion a year.
Germany, definitely. China was not there.
China was not there, but followed by Japan, $5.7 trillion a year, gross domestic production, GDP. And then Germany, $4.3 trillion a year. and of course other countries. So we talk about giant economies, and we have also to understand what is the relation between economy and development from one side and stability and other problems that were raised during the summit on the other side. And this, we have to understand that they are very well connected. All these problems, these countries, although they have strong economies and they are economically and probably security more stable, but they are very much also concerned about these issues like us, because they are also affected when we talk about terrorism, when we talk about human development, when we talk about illegal immigration, when we talk about these issues about gender and
inequality.
Inequality.
Empowering women and all the
women and that sort of things.
Those social issues.
Yeah, so they are very well connected with each other. So also we talk about armed conflicts and security and concerns in Africa. Where all of this is very much connected with the stability in the United States or Japan or Germany or Italy or Canada, all these countries. That's why they came together, and the main problem or the main topics that were raised in their agenda was problems that we might think that it's ours. It's not only ours, it's the whole world's.
If we start taking into consideration the theme of the Biarritz France, which is fighting inequality.
Yeah.
And that in itself leads to all the other issues and files on the agenda of the talks, including security, terrorism, climate change, definitely gender equality and women empowerment, and all the other very important files. But when we speak about the Arab and African worlds, we have to think of the theme, fighting inequality. Because you, as respectively, as said that 7 countries who are in control of more than 50% of the world's economies.
That's true.
And that means that they also in control of the political system of the whole world.
Yeah.
And usually we understand that the G7 has to do with shaping up the political future of the whole world.
That's right.
During the upcoming year until they meet again. So how far was the existence or the participation of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in this gathering that shapes the future of the whole world? Very timing and very wise the way he opened and discussed Middle Eastern issues and African issues.
Well, that's a very good and important issue, I have to say, because President Sisi in his not only speeches or official speech and other press conference statements, but also during his sideline meetings with the leaders of the world, or G7 leaders, he expressed openly and eloquently the concerns of Africa when it comes to these issues, and also shedding the light on this mutual responsibility from this different
international community
international community, and especially these countries gathering in France towards finding solutions and supporting these causes to alleviate its side effects in Africa. And he was also clear enough when he talked about the responsibility of the private sectors and civil society, and not only the governments, and because this is a mutual responsibility, and it's sort of a goal that not only government can do everything, but also it has to be that's when he stressed also on foreign investment, and when he urged different countries to come and invest in Africa, and also to support the African issues to find solutions. And also when we talked about the women issues and empowering women and inequality, and when we talked about stability and security. It's a main concern. And let me tell you also that in the recent years, the European countries, especially European countries, have recognized that unstable and poor Africa is against them, and the harm of that they could receive from unstable African countries through illegal immigration and terrorism and whatever happens of the side effects of the problems in some African countries will be very much affecting them. So they are not living in a separate world. They recognize this today, and they are today more able to be open in terms of assisting, in terms of cooperation, especially when you talk about human trafficking and illegal immigration. And they recognize today that it's not a matter of security measures be taken by either by Egypt or Libya or the northern African countries. It's much deeper than that. It's about economy, it's about security, it's about stability, it's about youth training and education, it's about health care. So it is a complicated issue in Africa, and I think that was clear enough when President Sisi expressed the African voice there in different occasions.
Definitely after already meeting with African leaders who were also invited and taking
Senegal and
a
South Africa
stance.
and Liberia, some African leaders were there. So it was very good opportunity for President Sisi to enhance the African voice there, and also to talk about the chronic issues, like also in the Middle East problems. So as you mentioned, Egypt strategically positioned to be a Middle Eastern country and an African country at the very same time. So that was also an opportunity to raise some issues concerning the Middle East and the problems.
Exactly. And so if we speak about every leader and the topics that were raised during the meetings with every leader. When we speak about the meeting of President Fattah al-Sisi with the US President, when the President highlighted the importance of the Palestinian issue as a core issue to all issues, and the way Egypt reiterated once and twice and 400 times Egypt's position towards a real solution to the matter. Afterwards, he spoke about Syria and how we can, or how issues can be resolved there. He even brought up the issue of Iran and its interference, as well as terrorism and the funds and all these issues. How far do you think Egypt was able to really reflect the vision that the United States has to put into mind while adopting a certain policy it is?
Well, let me start with my observation on the American President Donald Trump's statements and comments after meeting President Sisi, and who highlighted and also hailed and praised the President Sisi efforts in bringing stability and reforms to Egypt, which is very important for us as Egyptians to see how Egypt is doing in the eyes of the world leaders. That's one issue. Other issue, of course, we all know how United States is playing a very significant role in shaping the politics of the region when we talk about Middle East. So the issues that were raised with the meeting during the meeting with President Trump, as you mentioned, was this chronic issue of Palestinian cause and its fixed and stable and ever-existing position of Egypt when it comes to the Palestinian issue, that Egypt always in favor of and supporting the only acceptable solution for us is the solution of two independent states living on secured borders according to international legality decisions in this issue, which has always been the situation and the stance of Egypt when it comes to, even when the famous century deal is whenever it is raised, the so-called, that would not change the position of Egypt, and also Jordan,
Never.
So we have this always visible and very strong stance when it comes to the Palestinian cause. We only go for peace, of course, peaceful solution, and also just and fair solution based on international legality decisions, and especially when we talk about Security Council decision 242 and 338. So that was also one of the positive stances, where such big and chronic and sensitive issue being presented in such a big international event with the presence of the world leaders, especially United States, because we know how U.S. is very much effective and influential when it comes to its relation with Israel, and also its relation with all Arab countries in the region. Also, even with the other meetings, whether with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the French President Macron and other leaders, all the issues that were raised was not only about Egypt. It was about Africa, it was Middle East, and it was about upholding and developing mutual relations. That's why this summit is very much significant, and hopefully what will follow will be a good translation to what have been already raised and agreed upon during these meetings. And a lot can be done indeed. As we all and you mentioned, we talk about 7 countries controlling more or less the economy of the world. So we have to understand also that economy has this magic influence over stability. You cannot have security, you can't have education, you cannot have health care or infrastructure if the economy is not strong enough. So you can't have development, and you can't have economy if you are not a stable country. So this issue of security versus stability and development, that's why these topics were presented collectively during these meetings to shed the light on this sensitive and strong links. Why Africa today needs support, and what sort of assistance. It's not only financial, it's financial and else. It's financial, and as you mentioned very quickly, the politics in the region, whether in the Middle East or in Africa. So the world leaders have to understand that it's not only economy, it's also politics and how things are run whether in Africa or in the Middle East. The people here in the Middle East and Africa are eager for, as it was mentioned, equality and justice, and also development. So the translation of the African or Middle Eastern people of peace and stability and justice could go through several parallel lines. Of course, we have this economic line, but we have also this line of equality, this line of appreciation and understanding of the world's richest communities to our concerns and our problems, and to their responsibilities to intervene and to support. And one, of course, of these issues was the issue of the weather change.
Climate change.
Yeah, the climate change. The climate change and the enormous role of a country like the United States. If we know that the U.S. alone is responsible for more than 55 or 56% of the world pollution,
and yet the U.S. president...
They withdrawn from the International Convention of
But we have to announce here the joining of Egypt, as President Sisi announced that he was joining the MIDS Charter. And it's on biodiversity, since he spoke about how climate change reflects on Africa, definitely, particularly Africa. When we come back to his meetings with the G7 leaders, and 2 other very important meetings took place, one with the German Chancellor and the other with the French President. And why I'm linking both two, because both two, the President spoke with them on issues much relevant to their own interests and ours. So he opened the issue of Libya, which of course leads to the illegal migration that they are seeing. And he spoke about how important is it to stabilize this northern part of Africa.
Yes, I think Germany and France can do a lot together. Of course, France comes at the first level of the European countries recently that expressed very positive enthusiasm in terms of trying to help and support. If we talk about Libya and if we talk about other issues, whether in the Middle East or in Africa, and also Germany. So probably also that resonates with Egypt's trajectory of diplomatic or strengthening diplomatic relations with all effective world countries and leaders since President Sisi took office in 2014, not only relying on the diplomatic and strong strategic relation with the United States, but going to other sides of the world and other effective nations and countries like Germany, France, and Britain, United Kingdom, or Russia, or China. So comes at the same line his meetings with the German Chancellor and also with the French President. And I think there is a lot that they both can do. When it comes to illegal immigration, we have to remember that Germany is probably the country #1 in the European Union, which is supporting and giving assistance to refugees and illegal immigrants financially. And also they host tens of thousands of refugees. So both very much concerned with what's going on in Africa, as you mentioned. You talk about illegal immigration. Illegal immigration cannot be stopped, and refugees phenomenon cannot be stopped if still the situation sizzling in some African countries. From the north we talk about Libya, and then comes down to other countries in the continent. So raising this issue with German and French is very much important in terms of phrasing and the future relation between these two big countries and African Union, as President Sisi is.
Two of the most important economies that are in control of Europe's economies at this particular time.
Exactly.
And are shaping the future of Europe. So this, I guess, is putting us in how we will be dealing with Europe at this upcoming stage. Finally, in 1 minute, because this is all I have, how far was the participation of President Sisi this time in this G7 so important for both areas, Africa and the Middle East?
It's so important and significant, not only for Egypt, as I said, but also for Africa. And I think what is unique about Egypt heading the African, or President Sisi as president or heading the African Union this year, is expressing Egypt readiness to support all African countries. And President Sisi has expressed many times and started already practically that Egypt can extend whatever we can to support our African brothers in different countries. So this meetings in the G7 was not only to express our problems, but also to shape a future plan for the coming year, and how the European countries and the biggest economies in the world should be involved in a positive way to support Africa from the African eyes, not from these countries' eyes or viewpoints, which is so important, because it's not, as I said, it's not just financial issues. We have a lot of complications in the African Union, and that was good opportunity for those leaders to hear from an African leader, to hear from a country strategic and big like Egypt, the concerns of Africa. Hopefully, as I said, the coming weeks and months will be translating and effectively the positive atmosphere and agreements.
Transforming what was said into real deeds instead of words.
Exactly, and for the interest of not only Africa but also European and G7 countries.
Yes. Unfortunately, my time is out. I have to end it here. But of course, this has, or it remains to be seen, the conclusion or the outcome, the real outcomes of the G7 throughout the year. Dr. Brahim Ghazzawi, strategic and political answer. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And dear viewers, many thanks for watching. Next Saturday would be another Arab affair, important affair. So until then, goodbye.